Breaking into advertising is a challenge of its own. Over the past 70 plus episodes, I have interviewed many interesting people and learned how they broke into their unique roles within marketing and communications. This episode with Greg Taucher is unique because we focus on breaking into the industry and how to stay in it for the long term. Greg belongs in a category of guests that I especially enjoy talking to and a group that I aspire to be in one day. He is a professor of practice at Michigan State University. Chances are you had or have a professor that has years of agency experience that decided to enter academia. These professors are different. They give honest guidance, practical assignments, and connections to get you noticed if they see that you work hard. This is Greg Taucher at Michigan State. You could tell he is an incredible lecturer full of wisdom in this episode. He tells his story of starting as a double AE at DDB and rising the ranks to one of the top account guys in the world. He was an international account extraordinaire working in numerous countries. You'll also learn how he survived not one, but 2 bomb blasts. Greg sent us a list of resources he recommends to all his students and now to you specifically. To see those resources and to connect with Greg, head over to our Instagram at enteringad. One more time, that's at enteringad. And as usual, this episode is supported by our friends at Chicago Portfolio School. Visit them at chicagoportfolio.com. Now, on with the show. This is the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast, and as usual, I'm your accomplice, Gino Schellenberger. Kick it, Mikey. Greg Taucher, welcome to the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. Thanks for coming on, and how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Gino. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Talk about something that I have obviously a lot of heart and passion for. And, I think what you're doing with this podcast is really a terrific value add for people trying to, break and enter and
Absolutely.
Also kind of move up. So.
Yeah, well, I know I neglect a lot on this podcast. It was originally to break in and then to stay in for a long time. So maybe this episode, you might be able to help us with the latter as well as the former. How do you maintain a long, successful career in advertising? Because you have done so, and you've done so well that you're teaching at Michigan State University as a Hop faculty fellow professor of practice. So you're kind of like the pro at this stuff. So
well, I don't know.
It'll be fun to talk about.
I don't know if I'm the pro. I for some reason, I don't know, it's kind of in the middle of my career, I had this wild thought about, one day, I think I was on one of the AEF guest lecture things. Mm-hmm. And I said, that might be kind of fun to teach college one day. Well, be careful what you ask for, I guess, because here I am, but loving it, going into in January, it'll be 6 years at Michigan State, kind of doing this as my full retirement gig. So, enjoying it. So yeah,
what classes do you teach at Michigan State?
I kind of run the gamut. Mostly I teach management, being an account manager, type my entire career. I thought that was a natural fit. I've taught integrated campaigns. I teach insights and strategy, with my, experience in international. Teach the international course. Also, spinning up the student-run agency here at Michigan State, which has been an interesting year, getting through the bureaucracy of the university to get something like this going. Yeah. But my goal in all the classes is get people ready for the real world. I don't use textbooks. I think that's just outdated mode of thinking and teaching, and you just you just got to start. You got to get in it. This is not a rote recitation, memorization kind of industry. So you got to get out there and do it. Nice.
So you teach a good amount of classes, and you said briefly that you were account focused in your career. So what I want to talk about this podcast episode is highlighting into your career how you were successful in it at DDB and maybe some other places that I might have glossed over. But, having that long career, being successful, how'd you do it all? Take us to the beginning to when you said, hey, I want to do advertising.
Well, it's an interesting story. I was in college. I was on a basketball scholarship, and wanted to be a petroleum engineer. Wanted to go kind of follow my dad.
Ties directly into advertising.
Yeah, it doesn't at all. I was on collision course between practice and engineering lab. So I quickly, built a matrix of the course calendar and said, oh, I'll be a marketing major. Went from there, went to Northwestern, did the IMC degree. And was pretty deep into the brand manager recruiting process at P&G, and was like, I don't want to be a brand manager. So I went to advertising, and I went. There was an agency in Dallas, Tracy Locke, which was bought by DDB not shortly after I got there. Mm-hmm. I went to work for them as an assistant account executive. Everybody thought I was nuts for going down there. I said, well, I'm going to work on the second largest grocery brand in the United States, Doritos. And the rest is history. And I think, you start off as an assistant AE or account coordinator or whatever the title is. And, you're going to be doing a lot of things that aren't the glamour side of advertising. I mean, you're doing a lot of talent residual stuff, and you're doing, some trafficking, project management things and all that. But, you pay your dues, you listen, you learn, you get opportunities. And I think the biggest thing, Gino, that I kind of learned early in my career is make your job bigger than it is on paper. Go find some white space and say, hey, let's go attack this, or, take an initiative to a client or to your boss and say, hey, here's a good a business building idea that we should take to the client. I want to develop it. Well, you start getting experience, you start getting traction, you start getting noticed. And the next thing you know, you're kind of, moving into, different worlds and different accounts and all those kinds of things. And then, a lot of it is, you got to put yourself out there. I mean, you have to have the book smarts and the street smarts. I mean, you got to know how to get things done. Mm-hmm. And then you gotta take chances. And I think my biggest chance was, I was running Frito-Lay. I'd moved up to, senior account position, running Frito-Lay, doing all that in Dallas. DDB had American Airlines, and it was right when American Airlines was about to explode and go international. Okay. And there was the guy, this is what happens in the business, the guy running the account was asked off the business. The client asked him off the business, and that's, and so they had an open competition because they wanted to have sort of open interviews for what was going to be a global business director. Okay. And so I put my hat in the ring and said, hey, I want to do this. And everybody looked at me like I was nuts. It's like, you have no international experience. You're going to be, interviewing against guys who were out of the London office, New York, a couple guys from Germany, all that. So I went in for my interview and I turned the map around. I made a PowerPoint presentation to Keith Reinhardt, who's the chairman of DDB at the time, and a couple others, and Bernard Brochon, who is head of international. And I made a PowerPoint presentation on my vision for running this account. And it was based on, strategy, structure, and culture, which I learned through Roger Enrico on Frito-Lay. It's like, you can have a great strategy, great structure to deliver that, but if you don't have a great culture, it's all going to fail. So I make this presentation, I get the job, and suddenly I've got an account in 31 countries.
Wow.
And I was just like, and I kind of did this because I could see where the world was going, again, making the job bigger than it is on paper, and I had, what my real inspiration was, I just read a biography of Teddy Roosevelt. And when he was 12 or 15, he'd been around the world and traveled all over the place. And when he was 15 years old, he wrote down this quote. And he wrote this down in his diary. It says, "To understand no culture but one's own leads a man down a very dangerous path in life." And I took that to heart. And so I, kind of built up, the American Airlines, and we were doing great. And one day, Keith Reinhardt was down in Dallas, and we were out at a meeting at American Airlines, and we're driving back into Dallas from the airport where American's headquarters is. And I said, this whole international thing is pretty cool. And if anything were ever to open up were a position outside the country, I'd be more than game to do that.
Right.
Well, that was February. I got the call in April, and I was on a plane from Hong Kong bound in July, and I spent the next 8 years in Asia.
Incredible.
And my personal and professional growth curve on those 8 years in Asia was like a hockey stick. I mean, it was straight up. And, you're dealing with, all sorts of client problems. You get a call from, the client, the Budweiser client in China says, "I need you to talk to the media people in Hong Kong and find out what happened to my outdoor board because it's gone," as in like being cut down. Dealing, with all sorts of stuff and setting up organizations and how to teaching people how to run, multinational, multifaceted accounts and those kinds of things. I mean, it was a great experience. And personally, traveling around the region and spending time in countries and opening up offices in Vietnam and, Sri Lanka and, other places. And, it was the best. I loved it. It was a terrific time. My kids would come out and visit me in the summer. They were like, "Do we have to go back?" So
Wow.
it was good for everybody. And then moved from there into, ran the global accounts job, had, responsibility for the world at that point. And for the global accounts represented about 40% of DDB's worldwide revenue. That was $3 billion. So that was 40% of $3 billion. So it was
Holy cow.
Big numbers and big people. So I had multiple simultaneous jobs. I was running global accounts. I was the chief people officer because we're having to move people around and do all kinds of stuff. And then I was doing client contracts and compensation. So, I had quite the run. And when I got the letter from American Airlines congratulating me on achieving 10 million Advantage miles, I said, it's time for me to do something else. So, so that's, kind of how I got into, decided to go do the teaching thing. But I think, you look back on the career and it's, the people you meet and the people that you've learned from. And I think that's the important thing for, the people who are going to be listening to this is that, you're going to learn something new every day, every meeting you're in, every presentation you make, every time you sit in on an internal creative review or sit in on an internal strategy session or deal with the people in the media agencies or, the data guys and all that. Mm-hmm. You're going to learn something new. And, keep a file of articles and just notes you've taken and, thoughts that have, and just put it away, and you have to become a little bit of a pack rat, I think, in this business because, you're surrounded by stuff. And I think you have to also look at, it's not just advertising or PR or media or, whatever discipline you're in. It's all about creativity. What's the creative solution that's creative solution could be media, it could be promotion. It could be, it could be a myriad things. Mm-hmm. So I think just don't get so focused on one single discipline. It's, it's kind of like, being a Magic Johnson or in basketball, you play with your head up, you got to see the whole floor. And I think that's one of the things that, is really, going to help you kind of continue to learn and grow. Back to your original premise, what keeps you in this business, you add value. You add value to your agency, you add value to your client's business.
Yep.
You're provide, and that value is probably strategic thought leadership. And, nowadays you got to marry data and insights together to come up with the creative solutions.
Yep.
And, and I think the other thing, and this is, words I heard early on in my career, be nice to the people you know on the way up, because they're the same ones you're going to know on the way back down. And I think you got to understand that, the human element, is always going to be part of this. Everybody's going to have their own agenda. You're not going to get along with everybody and all these kinds of things. But, it's a marathon. You got to go you have to go the distance and really kind of get things, kind of even keel, so to speak.
Yeah. What are some of the skills that will help you out long term in this marathon that you should develop early on, as soon as possible, if you're a student or you're a recent grad? What should we focus on right away?
Well, I think there's the two big ones for me. We're always learn how to write, become a great writer, and then become an even better presenter. Because I think what people lose sight of is, we're selling ideas. It's like we're selling points of view, we're selling strategies, we're selling, we're selling a dream. I worked with a creative guy, and every brief he'd get from a client, he'd turn to the client and says, "What's your dream?" And I think if we understand that, we're kind of in the business now of kind of expanding, sort of the relationship that, we have with consumers, I think, it's understanding that we have to sell ideas. We have to understand what we're talking about. We have to have, the research and the data and the command of that content to be able to, put it into a persuasive presentation or whatever, so we can sell the idea. So I think becoming a great presenter, building great relationships with clients, and make sure you have a relationship at the top. I think one of the hardest things to learn as you're coming up is who's the client. Who actually is the client in the organization. And it's not the person who can say yes or no with regard to creative, but it really comes down to who's the person who can fire you, and understand it, and building a relationship there. Having a relationship at the top won't save you, but it'll buy you one more chance. And I think that, the value of relation, they can't be superficial. I have, I'm still really good friends with clients today, and, it's just, you build up friendships, understand that they're going to be more loyal to their organization than to yours. But, you kind of get to the blood is thicker than water. And then, I'll finish this off, Gino, with, understand who you are, and don't, you gotta push yourself out there. You have to have this, healthy sense of competitive paranoia, which is, hey, there's somebody out there thinking about this harder, better, faster, smarter than I am. But don't overreach, don't go a bridge too far. You have to be able to deliver. The ability to get things done and understand and managing deadline, early on things, deadlines and these kinds of things is really important. It never goes away. So I think, is just staying on top of stuff and staying ahead of your client. Those are the big ones.
Love it. Love it. Now, so you got up and left the country. You had kids at the time. I mean, they were young kids at the time.
No, they were teenagers.
Oh, okay. Tell me a story about that. Overseas, where anything crazy happened to you that you love telling your students?
Well, I'm probably the only person who's been in 2 bomb blasts.
Okay, let's hear about that.
I was in. We were getting ready for a McDonald's presentation in Sri Lanka. McDonald's was there. We were opening up an office there for McDonald's. Tamil Tigers are still doing the Civil War thing. And next thing I get off the plane, and I knew I was not in Kansas anymore. I mean, there were soldiers with, big guns everywhere. And all of a sudden, boom, and there was a car bomb set off about a half a block away, and kind of blew us across the room in the conference room and stuff. And it was one of those questions, like, why am I here? Kind of things.
Wow.
But, it was, it's all grist for the book. It's one of those things you tell that at a cocktail party. People are like, yeah, you're right. I've never met anyone who's been in a bomb blast.
Set the context up.
We were in the agency's conference room preparing for the presentation. We were putting the final presentation together. I mean, we had stuff spread out all over the table and storyboards on, we had the creative work, hanging the creative work for the presentation was the next morning. So, we had to kind of transplant everything and, find a hotel meeting room very quickly and kind of move everything there, which, we had to, fix it in the field kind of thing. But, it was an interesting one. So
everybody was okay.
Everyone's fine. Everyone was fine. And we all it was interesting. The locals were like, oh, bomb blast. Oh, okay. It's
wow.
Yeah.
And you presented the next morning? Yeah,
we presented the next morning, and they said, and everybody was like, they said, wow, I had to be, and the people from McDonald's corporate in Chicago, they were like, wow, glad we did the meeting, today and not yet, they start going back and forth and all that. But it was, it was an interesting experience. Let's just say it builds character.
I'm glad you guys were all okay, and hopefully the presentation went well.
And we won the business. It was okay. It was us and Leo Burnett. So that was the agency roster at the time, and we won. And I think they're up to like 12 or 14 stores in Sri Lanka now. So it was But that was the interesting thing about international is, you had to open up offices where, clients were going and build those relationships and start to, teach people how to run accounts the way that they needed to be run and all those kinds of things. I actually had the American Airlines client say to me one day, why can't you service our account in El Salvador the way you do here in the States? And you kind of have that look in, that thought bubble that goes like, think about what you just said, dude, but you can't do that. But I think that's the other thing. Clients have expectations for agency service, what they're going to get out of it, and what they're going to do. So, I think it's also understanding the client organization and, kind of what their hot buttons are and what their issues are and be mindful of those as you're going through it.
What was the other one? You said you were one of two?
Yeah, in Jakarta in Indonesia, had just eating lunch in a restaurant and had thank God I'd gotten up and gone to the restroom because I was around the corner behind two walls and same thing, boom. And, when I went out there, it was much not as pretty a sight as it was in Sri Lanka. Let me just put it that way. So,
wow.
Again, and the people I was with were miraculously relatively unscathed. But
okay.
So it's I think when you're out, in the world, you just got to be aware of what's going on around you. And, I've done study abroad and, I tell the students all the time, you come out of the building, you stop, you just look both ways up and down the street, see what's going on.
Yeah, that's good advice.
And if it doesn't look right, it doesn't look right, well, go back inside.
Yeah. I do that in Chicago sometimes.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, I lived up in Evanston, and even up there you hear, there's some things that are going on that are a little, were a little funky. So, I think it's just, just be mindful of what's going on around you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good life advice in general.
Well, kind of got us off topic there. Sorry about that.
No, that was very interesting. I mean, you don't hear those types of stories and all the time. But any other interesting like pitches or stories and
Yeah,
besides advertising that you like to
you
talk
know,
about?
we had to do a major creative presentation in China for Budweiser, August Bush the third and the fourth, and the whole crew from St. Louis was coming over, and we had the distributors, and we had and it's just a little intimidating. You're up there, presenting creative, and and it's they wanted to use some of the quality they wanted to adapt the quality campaign from the United States. And I got to be the one to stand up and tell August Bush the third that we weren't going to recommend his campaign because the Chinese market, they didn't like it. Their attitude was, well, of course he's going to say it's a good product. It's his company,
Right.
I mean, so, they found it to be rather self-serving, and sort of like, he was a bragging American. And he just kind of sat there and he goes, a bragging American. I said, direct quotes from consumers, sir. So, sometimes you have to, I think that the biggest thing about international, Gino, is you got to just kind of forget that you're, that it's the U.S. You have to just get totally outside the U.S. perspective. Yeah. And that's really hard. That's really hard. It's hard for agencies to do, and it's hard for clients to do. And, but I think that, if you want to, and the world is more connected now. So I think we're, everybody's going to have more and more international opportunities, is listen to the locals, understand their point of view. When I left to go overseas, my mother gave me two pieces of advice. She says, don't try and solve every problem like an American, and don't ever forget you're a guest in someone else's country.
Yeah.
And I think, and she actually used the word home. But I think those are two good things, it's just kind of like, don't be that guy. Don't be the ugly American.
Yeah. I saw, there was a campaign recently that went pretty viral that was like, to be a better American, you need to get out of the United States.
Yeah. And, I would come back, and I'd be here and I just go, wow, this is just, it's like coming back to a foreign country.
Right.
Yeah. And no one has, international perspective, and I think, historically, I think everybody kind of understands why, but it's a big world out there. And, people would always go like, well, what would you do, over there? Did you go to movies and restaurants and all that? Yeah. Yeah. I said, you'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to watch the Super Bowl and, all the kinds of weird hours and these kinds of things. Mm-hmm. But it was, it was life as a local, which was, really, it was really pleasant. It was really pleasant and nice. Very humbling at times as well, because it's like, what, it's, you just can't get upset about situations in this. It's just let it roll.
Interesting. I bet it made you a better advertiser, a better professional, which is why you're teaching at Michigan State. And what are your goals there now? You've been there for 6 years, you said?
Almost, yeah. Well, yeah. I think the thing, Gino, really is, is to get people ready for the rigors of the real world. It's everybody has this concept that, advertising is kind of this, airy fairy kind of thing. You go off, you do ads, you do cool stuff, all that. Yeah. You got to understand the grind. You have to understand, the 9 to, whatever, and the weekends and the late nights and all that kind of stuff, and short deadlines, and, there's no late, and, people are counting on you to do your job. And, if you don't do your job, you're going to screw up their job. And, I just think it's and the big thing is, there's no right or wrong. It's again going back to what you can sell, And so I think it's a, to kind of set it up in understanding sort of the arc of the day job, and then throw in all the crap that nobody wants to talk about: scope of work, P&L, performance reviews, quarterly business reviews, all that stuff that just is like electricity that runs through the wall, but nobody ever wants to see, touch, or hear. And I think, as I tell the students all the time, there's going to come a point in your career where the lines are going to cross, and you're no longer in the advertising business. You're in the people and the finance business, and you have to prepare for that day, because in order to be successful, you have to understand, the business piece of this as well. So, I think there's a lot of things, I try and cover. I mean, I had a student call me to about a week or 10 days ago, and he's working as a planner in an agency. And he goes, "Man, you were right." He says, "This is like drinking from a fire hose." He says, "I got so much stuff going on." And he said, "I'm in meetings. I got deadlines." He says, where do you find the time to actually do your job? And I said, "Nights and weekends, early mornings." I said, "You got to figure out the pattern here, because if you don't do that," I said, you're going to be running around, like with your hair on fire for a long time."
Yeah. And he just started.
Yeah. So I think it's that jump from school to the professional arena, which I think it's a big jump. It's you talk about moving up from high school to college, and but nobody really talks about moving out to the next level.
Yeah. What do you tell your students? Like, do you have any resources you recommend them to follow? We got the ad ages and the ad weeks. Anything you follow a lot?
I follow Campaign religiously. They seem to have a pretty good, finger on the pulse. Ad Forum is a great site. It's Hervé de Klerk out of Paris, and he started off as building a company for search consultants, a website for search consultants to go on and look at agency credentials. But now it's opened up where it's production companies, and there's talent pages and networking, and they put all the great creative on there, and they do their 5 best from Europe every week. Here's the 5 best from Europe. Here's 5 best, and so it's a great site in terms of it's really well connected to what the buzz is and all of that, and they've got some great resources. I mean, students can go on and build talent profiles and these kinds of things. So Ad Forum to me is a big one. I mean, that's just one to follow all the time, just to kind of stay up with what's what.
Nice. Interesting. I've heard of this, and now I'm looking through it. This is actually really helpful, it seems like. Nice. What can students reach out to you, even if they don't go to Michigan State?
Sure.
Is there some sort of a deal where you're not supposed to talk to other Big Ten?
No. It's it's at this point, in where I am in my career, Gino, is it's like, hey, if somebody wants to get in the business, and they got the heart, and they got the passion. Hey, let's do what I can to provide guidance and counsel and these kinds of things. I also tell students, hey, you sure you want to do this? This business isn't for everybody, and understand, that you're going to be working with people who may not have the advertising background that you do. I mean, a lot of people get into the industry from all over the place, and so I think it's I think the diversity piece of the thinking that comes into this thing, that's what I've always loved about it too, is just all the different points of view and all these kinds of things. But I mean, I test drove my teaching down at Oklahoma one semester. I'd go down on Fridays and Saturdays. No mean feat getting from New York City to Oklahoma City, 3 planes later. But I still, hear from students down there, and, students who've graduated from there, and students who are, who've now ended looking, thinking about second jobs or career changes or going back to grad school. I'll give you a point of view. It may not be what you want to hear, but you asked, I'll tell you.
Right.
So.
Yeah. We want honesty. A lot of these times, there's people out there that are, giving away advice and stuff like that, portfolio reviews, whatever it is, and they're not that invested. So we appreciate those who are true mentors who will tell it like it is.
Well, and I think the frustrating part is, it's again, back to the, managing expectations. If you're going to say you're going to look at somebody's review or going to look at their resume or cover letter and all that stuff, do it, and do it with heart and do it, with some seriousness, because the person on the other side of the desk, that's why they're coming to you, so you owe them, not only the courtesy, but you also owe them, sort of the heart that they want and opinion they want from you, because, they want to improve. They want to get into the industry. So, don't ghost people. That I hear students talk about, how people ghost them all the time. And it's just, it's like, give me their names. I just want to I'll just send them an email and say, you know what, you're not helping here. I had to send one to a guy at a media agency. I said, hey, you guys are coming to me saying, do you have students who are, want jobs and are available for jobs? I said, then they contact you and they never freaking hear from you again. I said, man. I said, that speaks really poorly for you. And, if I was, I'd maybe start thinking twice about working for you, because if that's the culture that you guys have there, maybe you're not such a hot place after all.
Wow. I'm sure a bunch of people listening right now are just excited to hear that you stood up for them.
Yeah. I think it's a bunch of BS, it's like, we're not going to grow as an industry if we continue to do things the way we've always done it. Right. And I think that's why big agencies are in trouble. And you see agencies like High Dive and Mischief at no, certain address or whatever that agency is. And you're seeing all these guys pop up, and it's not where you work, guys. It's going to be the kind of work you do.
Yes.
And what you learn and how you grow clients' business. Clients are interested about 3 things: revenue, growth, and customers. Well, how are you going to impact those 3 things? And if you do it, with the best creative solution that you can, guess what? You're going to stay in the game for a long time. You're going to build that, you're going to build that relationship. And I think the other thing, it's really important. Yeah, I was talking to a search consultant a week or so ago, a good friend of mine, and we talked about the importance and the value of trust in this industry, and how that is really one of you talk about longevity. If somebody trusts you, if a client has trust in you, if your senior management has trust in you, you're going to be able to run this out. You got to have that, you got to have that fire in your belly that just won't quit. But you got to have, people have to trust you. And I think that is, one of the things that, I really worked hard to do is to earn people's trust.
Yeah.
And
it's not given.
No. And, and I think that's and it's so basic, and it's one of those duh. Yeah, but it's so important. And I think that it's a real discriminator in terms of, kind of where you are in the career path and those kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing your knowledge on, your story and the advice that you have, to stay in the game long term. That's really important. And I think you've done a great job. That's all I got. I encourage our listeners to reach out to Greg with any questions or, career advice, because he seems like he's invested and passionate. So thank you again. Anything else that you want to shout out? MSU?
No, Gino, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure. I hope I hope no one's dumber for having listened to this. That's always a big fear. But it's just onward and upward. And, I appreciate your time. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Did you hear anything on this episode about a job you'd like to have someday, soon, in advertising, strategy, design? The kind of job where you use your brain and your creativity? If you did, chances are a portfolio can really help you get that job. That's where Chicago Portfolio School comes in. They have programs and classes that help you show off your thinking and get you the job you want. So visit them at chicagoportfolio.com. And if you drop my name, Gino, into the chat box, they'll send you more info and a cool Sharpie. Or just some more info. You can decide that. Thanks. Thank you all for listening to this entire episode of the Breaking and Entering Advertising podcast. I hope you enjoyed this week's guest. Make sure you go and connect with them on LinkedIn. Tell them that Breaking and Entering sent you. Now, thank you to Mikey Malarkey, our audio technician, and Buchan Zhang, our creative director, as well as the student team from the Midnight Oil Agency at the University of Illinois. Can't do it without you all. Thank you very much. We will see you all next week with another amazing guest.